Episode 149 of CppCast with guest Phil Nash, recorded May 4th, 2018. This episode of CppCast is sponsored by PVS Studio, one of the most powerful static analyzers for C, C++, and C# source code. PVS Studio will let you detect errors and potential vulnerabilities at the earliest stage. Try the demo version today at viva64.com. In this episode, we talk about IDE refactoring and conference news. Then we talk to JetBrains developer advocate Phil Nash. Phil talks to us about the rebooted CppChat show and much more. Welcome to episode 149 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Rob. Ready for C++ now?
Yeah, good. That's exciting. That's how many days is that conference?
5.
5 days. Okay. Happy Star Wars Day, by the way.
Yes, may the 4th be with you.
Yes, indeed. Of course, our last episode, I guess, aired on May the 4th, but we're doing a little time travel again so that you can focus on the conference next week.
Yes, and I just saw a tweet from LeVar Burton.
Okay.
It says, "May LaForge be with you."
Nice.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at the top of every episode, I like to read a piece of feedback. We got a long one this one. It's an email from Theo. And he said he's a C++ developer living in Germany. His work is related to robotics, embedded C++, and continuous integration. And he said he just caught up with our most recent episode. He actually just discovered podcasts in December of last year and discovered our podcast on January 24th. So he listened to almost 150 episodes in 3 months. It's pretty impressive. And from then he was hooked. Now he feels satisfied and at the same time sad because he's heard so many great episodes and learned so much, but sad because he has to wait a whole week to get a new one now. He wants to thank us for the great job, and he said he really likes the episodes with Jackie K, Dave Moore, since he's a robotics developer, and he really enjoyed the ones with Odin Holmes and Dan Sachs as well. He also said he's going to be going to meeting C++ this year after listening to our show. So that's great. I hope you enjoy that conference. Well, I'm glad you found the podcast. I'm glad you're going to be kind of taking an active part in the C++ community and going to the conference. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us today, again, is Phil Nash. Phil has spent the last year and a half doing things that might sound interesting for the next time he's interviewed on CppCast. He might have overdone it. Aside from that, he's most commonly known as the original author of the test framework Catch 2. He's been in or around C++ since the early 90s, but started coding in 1981 on a ZX81 that he borrowed for 6 months. He's worked in many domains, including finance and mobile, and is now a developer advocate for C++ and Swift tools at JetBrains. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Seems like only last week we were last speaking.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that to start off?
I think we're going to get to that anyway, but yes, we recorded an episode of CppChat last week with John Kalb as well, which is the reboot of the show. We'll talk about that a bit more in the main part of the episode.
Sure.
So I think Phil would like to correct your pronunciation of the computer that he first programmed on.
Uh-oh.
The ZX81 is the correct name. The Sinclair ZX81. Which I think did come over to the States, but I'm not sure if it came over by a different name.
Timex.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, different branding. But yes, the British model is correctly supposed to be called the ZX, right?
That's right. Created by Sir Clive Sinclair.
Right.
Okay. Well, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Phil, comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking more about everything you've been up to lately, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so this first one is a pretty interesting article, Safely Extract a Method in Any C++ Code. And it's basically about how, lots of tools, including JetBrains, tools like CLion, ReSharper, and also Visual Assist have extract method features, but you could sometimes get into trouble if they don't, take parameters in the way you would want them to, and you could wind up getting some bugs. And he built a process, he called it a recipe, for kind of safely making sure your code can be extracted, which is basically kind of turning it into a Lambda and seeing, what needs to be captured in order for that Lambda to compile. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I put this in here because I was really curious about Phil's take on it compared to what the JetBrains tools are supposed to be able to do. I've never used the extract function features in an IDE before.
Yeah, I thought you might have been putting this in here to troll me a bit. But
no, not trolling. I wanted your actual opinion.
So I should start by saying I thought the article was very good overall, very well written, very well thought through. I really like the step-by-step approach to really be careful about not making any mistakes along the way. I'm not quite sure I completely agree with his premise, though, that the tools can't be trusted. I do agree that the tools aren't perfect. JetBrains tools or anyone else's tools. C++ is a very complex language to parse and understand for humans or tools alike. But the tools can still help. So yeah, I wouldn't blindly trust a tool to do a big complex refactoring. He was talking about many thousands of lines of code, thousands of lines of code, and like 1,000-line method to extract. That's quite a big job. So yeah, I wouldn't just trust it blindly. Check what it's actually done, make sure that it's correct and that it's done it the way that you want. And the only thing that he brought out as being a potential problem that the tools would do would be to change the way that the arguments were passed. And that strikes me as something that can be inspected fairly easily after the fact. Whereas the big tedious part, the actual moving the code around, the tools can do quite well. So I would encourage people reading this to try to use a tool as well, just to take some of the labour-intensive parts out of it.
So that did make me curious, and something I've never stopped to think about before. Like, how does the tools decide if it's referenced cost, reference value, whatever?
So some of it's just heuristics. So if it sees a primitive, like an int, it will tend to pass that by value. If it's something more complex, then it will default to passing that by const ref usually. And obviously thinking around some of this is changing now. Like we're often taking strings, for example, by value and relying on move semantics and copy elision and things to sort that out for us. So yes, this changes over time, but most of the refactorings will actually give you the choice as well, where that's important. So you're usually in control, and even when you're not, let's say actually going back and changing it to what you wanted is not normally a big job anyway.
Right. Yeah, assuming you didn't extract a chunk that needed like 25 parameters passed to it or something.
Yeah, that may have other problems.
Right.
The other thing that struck me about this article, actually, he didn't really go into this, which is not really a fault of the article. It had a different focus, but if you're going to attempt any sort of refactoring like this on like a large legacy code base, which is what he was talking about, you really need to make sure you've got a lot of good tests for that.
Right.
And of course, that's really tricky if you're working with legacy code. But there are techniques and approaches for that. For example, Michael Feather's book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. It's quite old now, but still very relevant. A lot of techniques in there. And I noticed that one of the reviewers of the article was Llewellyn Falco, who I know fairly well. He's got a tool, or a suite of tools actually, called approval testing, which can be really useful for testing code that you don't necessarily control the nuts and bolts of, often from the outside in, by sort of taking a serialized version of the output and then comparing that against a textual representation. Particularly for regression testing, as you would be doing here, that can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing about unit testing, especially if it's, if you're really extracting like 1,000 lines of code into a new method. I would definitely want to have some tests around that to make sure it goes safely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the other articles we have are actually all conference announcements, right, Jason?
Yeah, well, it's conference season, it seems.
Yeah. So the first one is Pacific C++, or Pacific++. Mm-hmm. They have a call for speakers until June 17th. We should have put these in by date order, maybe.
Well, it's... I take responsibility for that. But Pacific++ has also announced who their keynotes are, so we may as well mention that since we're mentioning the conference.
Sure, who are the keynotes this year?
It is, I am loading it right now. Sean Parent and Titus Winters and James McNellis is announced as a speaker as well. I guess it's not clear which of them are the keynotes or not, but so those three are announced speakers. It's a 2-day conference with 2 keynotes, 3 speakers announced.
Right. Well, those are 3 great speakers to start off with.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next one is Meeting Embedded, and that's the first Meeting Embedded conference, right?
Yes, and it's, if I understand correctly, the day before Meeting C++ starts in the same venue.
Jens is going to be busy.
Yes.
So, okay, so it's the day before, and then is it 2 or 3 days of Meeting C++?
Yeah, 3 days, right?
3 days, okay.
Phil?
Yeah, 3 days now, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good way to do it, to kind of combine the conferences in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the keynote for Meeting Embedded specifically is Dan Sachs.
Right.
And that has been announced.
And the dates for submitting your talk to Meeting Embedded and to Meeting C++ are both June 10th.
Yes.
And then do we have any announcements for Meeting C++? Do we have any keynotes for that one yet?
All the keynotes are known for Meeting C++ also. That is Andrei Alexandrescu. I almost didn't say his last name because I figured everyone would know who I was talking about. But Andrei Alexandrescu, Lisa Lippincott, and Nikolai, and I cannot pronounce his last name. I don't know if it's Jositas or Yositas or how it's. Do you know how that's pronounced, Phil?
I always say Jositas.
Jositas?
I don't know if it's correct.
I believe he's Germanic, so that's why I've always questioned it, and I should ask him again next time I talk to him.
Okay, and then the last call for submissions that we have is for CppCon 2018, and you have a little bit less time for this one. Call for submissions is May 11th.
May 11th, and this episode's going to air, on May 11th.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
So if you are hearing this episode and it's still May 11th, get that submission in before the end of the day. Yes.
Yeah, a couple hours left.
Ideally, you should start working on it just before you hear this, and then you'll be ready.
Yes. That should be your goal.
And are there any announcements yet? I mean, we've talked a couple times about the pre-con and post-conference classes. We don't know who's keynoting yet, though, do we?
No. No comments on classes, but the class page, no keynote announcements, but the classes page is up and live. 2018 classes, everything's up right now.
Okay, so we talked before about who are giving those various classes, but now you can see what classes everyone is giving.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So, Phil, where should we start? Do we want to start talking about CppChat?
That seems appropriate, like a nice handover. So, many people may have already been watching John Kalb's CppChat YouTube stream that he was doing more or less weekly, for some weeks anyway. Sometime last year, just after C++ Now, he went on a hiatus. In fact, the webpage said for quite a long time, on hiatus until CppCon, which of course was last September. And then nothing until he came on your show just a few months ago and said that he wanted to get it started again, but he was looking for a producer for the show because he wanted to also make it into a podcast, who would also be a co-host. So I've told this story now a couple of times on CppChat, but I'll say it again. I was just dropping off to sleep when I was listening to that episode, so I didn't really, wasn't really able to stop myself from replying and saying, yeah, I'll do it. So I've ended up being the the co-host for the show. I'm going to be producing the podcast. We've got a couple of episodes recorded already. One of them featuring a couple of very strange guests. I'm not sure where we got them from. In fact, it was the two of you. We had you on last week to do the first episode that went out live on the new format. But a couple of weeks before that, at the ACCU conference, we did a special episode there with some of the organisers and other people active in the ACC organisation, live at the conference. So that one's all recorded, and I'm going to be putting that out hopefully this weekend if I remember to bring the audio files with me. And then we'll be doing another conference special at C++ Now next week, which should go out next weekend. So all going well, we'll be sticking to our more or less weekly schedule. I think the podcast for last week is already out, so you should be able to get that if you're on any iTunes directory based podcast player.
And for our listeners who haven't watched any of John Kolb's original CppChat videos, do you want to talk a little bit about the format? Because it's a little bit different than what we do.
It is. In some ways, it's sort of like an inverse of the way that you do things.
You have the guest interview the host?
Well, that was last week. So,
okay.
On this show, you have a few news items at the beginning that everyone talks about, and then it's mostly an interview with the guest for the week. On CppChat, most of the show is the talking about current items in the news in the community. But if there's a new guest on, there'll be a little bit of an interview with that person. And the other main difference is that there's often a number of guests on. So last week we had the two of you. Mm-hmm. The conference one, we had about 8 or 9 people, I think. Usually it's somewhere in between those two. Plus it does go out live on YouTube as we're recording it. And on the CPP Lang Slack, there is a channel for CppChat where people can comment during the show and actually ask questions that we may ask a guest as we're recording.
So that is the plan moving forward, is that they will always air live on YouTube and then be packaged up for podcast download for people that are interested?
Yeah, that's going to be the normal format. As I say, we do sometimes do the conference specials where it's recorded and then we just publish it later rather than going out live.
Okay. All right. So, Phil, you, besides CppChat and your role at JetBrains, you go to effectively every conference that you can go to, it seems. You have probably more conference presentations on YouTube than almost anyone else in the C++ community. I'm guessing. It's a lot, right? Do you know how many you have currently up?
I know that last year I did 27 talks.
Wow.
Not all of them, but a lot of them. So most of them were recorded and are available online. Now, they weren't all... well, first of all, that wasn't all at conferences. That includes meetups. Mm-hmm. It also includes lightning talks. And it's not just in the C++ community. So I also go to iOS and Swift conferences as well. So that explains why there's so many of them. Even an Agile conference as well. So that there's only a handful of C++ conferences. So I definitely do most of those. I haven't been to Pacific C++ yet. Hope to get there soon. But all the ones in Europe and the States, the big ones, I've been getting to. And I'm not sure that I have the most talks yet, but definitely must be up there.
It's got to be up there. Do you have any particular favorite from any conference? I know sometimes you give the same talk at multiple conferences, but I'm sure some version of it is better than some other version. So any particular talk from any particular conference that you think our listeners should go watch?
Well, I did have a good run with my functional programming talk, Functional C++ for Fun and Profit. I actually did that 8 times.
Oh, wow.
In total. A lot of those at meetups. And I'd say probably the one I did at the Italian C++ conference was the best one, partly because it was the last one that I did, the last time I did that particular talk. So obviously I was more practiced and a little bit more polished. but also because we had Bartosz Maluski in the audience, and some of his friends from the Haskell community were there. So I really had to up my game a bit when talking about functional programming. So I think that's probably the best one.
Did they ask any questions that stumped you?
Yes. Not as many as I was dreading. You'll have to watch the talk to find out.
Oh, that sounds like fun, yeah.
I might also mention one of the lightning talks that I do. One that I've done a few times now, called The Stand-Up.
Okay.
It actually starts off with a bit of stand-up comedy, but it actually pivots twice before I actually get to the real subject. And again, you'll have to watch the talk to find out what it is.
Was that intentional?
For that one, I'd probably recommend the first one that I did, which was at CppCon 2015.
Okay.
I want to interrupt the discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Development of qualitative software is impossible without the use of static code analysis tools. These tools enable you to detect code vulnerabilities and ridiculous typos. By the way, many developers tend to underestimate the typos issue. That's why we suggest reading the article, The Evil Within the Comparison Functions. One of the most powerful static analyzers is PVS Studio. This tool detects errors and potential vulnerabilities in the source code of programs written in C, C++, and C#. It works in Windows, Linux, and macOS environments, and it conveniently and easily integrates into the Visual Studio IDE versions 2010 to 2017. Try the demo version of PVS Studio and find errors in the code of your project today. So I think last time we had you on the show, we were talking about Catch 2 and various updates in the unit testing library. And I think one of those we talked about was Clara, the command line processor, and how you kind of separated that out into its own library. Have you seen much use of that as a standalone tool from the community?
Yeah, so actually I spun Clara out of Catch originally when I released Catch 1.0.
Oh, okay.
Which is quite a few years ago now. But I never felt it was quite complete. I had a couple of design issues, and it was stuck in C++ 98 because Catch itself was at the time. And it had a little bit of interest, but nothing too major. So when we did Catch 2 and we moved to C++ 11, I took the opportunity to just completely rewrite Clara, take advantage of C++ 11, but also redesign it. So to fix those design issues and design it around this concept of composability. The idea that you can actually take the sort of several smaller parsers and compose them together into a composite parser. And one of the advantages of that is that you can have different parts of a large application that don't necessarily know about each other, expose their own command line interface, and then at the top level you can just compose that up into one combined interface, which is very useful for Catch, of course, because that's combined with other people's code. So it's one way to augment the command line processing in a test application. So when I released that as a 1.0, I also started talking about it more publicly at conference talks. There's a lightning talk I've done a series of as well. And probably pushed it a little bit too much because there's a sudden surge of interest in it. and now a lot of issues and feature requests, and I'm having trouble keeping up with that again. So yes, it has seemed to have been quite popular.
That's good. It's unusual to have more than one successful project, I think. And difficult. You have to deal with all those pesky users with their support requests.
Yeah, users can't live with them, can't live without them.
Right.
Yeah, it's not quite Catch levels of success yet, but it's definitely picking up.
Yeah, Catch is... Last I looked, I don't even remember the numbers, but it has a lot of support on GitHub. Many stars, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I did look at the download stats at one point, because you can get them from GitHub. And I'm not quite sure exactly what they mean because, some people have tools that just pull things regularly, whether they're using it or not. But, yeah, there's definitely many thousands of people using it at least, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've got 6,800 stars and 123 contributors, it says now.
Right. Yeah. I haven't been keeping up with that.
You should send each of them a T-shirt to thank them for their contributions.
Yeah. If you're going to pay for it, maybe.
Right.
So what talk are you going to be giving at C++ Now this week?
Yeah, so I'm actually first going to be giving that talk tonight as we record this, and then next Wednesday in Aspen. Of course, by the time this airs, I will have given both of those. So the talk is called Optional is Not a Failure. And as you can probably guess from the title, it's about error handling. And I think it's one of those ideas whose time has come. Obviously, we've been doing error handling for a long time. We've been talking about exceptions for years, but the last year or two in particular, there's been a lot of interest in newer approaches to error handling that, again, are coming from more functional programming languages with optional, with variant, and the proposed standard expected. Also boost outcome, which is sort of a refinement on that. And there's new ways of thinking about how you handle errors as well. And one of the things that my talk's going to get into is some of the mathematical underpinnings of that as well, which is not talked about quite so much. And there's different trade-offs to all these different approaches to error handling. There's no one that sort of across the board just ticks all the boxes. Except there might be a proposal in the air for a new feature that will actually achieve that. So that's going to be quite intriguing. I don't want to talk too much more about it here because it's pre-proposal at the moment. And of course, I have to give you a reason to go and watch my talk.
Right.
But, remains to be seen whether that will actually be almost zero trade-offs. It's definitely very interesting.
And as a little peek behind the curtain here, the meetup that Phil mentioned is my meetup that he'll be speaking at. Phil is in Colorado right now also.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that you guys were co-located right now, right?
Yes, so if you have notice any weird audio issues or anything, we've got our world is a bit jumbled up compared to usual with us both recording in the same location today.
Yeah.
Except you're upstairs now.
Yes. We were in the same room, but we were getting feedback kind of issues, echo issues, so.
One thing we also talked about with you when we were on CppChat last week is how you're going to be doing one of is it a pre-con or post-conference training event at CppCon this year?
It's a post-con. In fact, I'm going to be on at the same time as Jason, so we're going to have to fight that one out.
Yeah, I believe we actually proposed a battle royale on CppChat to see who wins the most students. I've been putting a lot of thought to that. We can discuss how that'll work.
Right. Okay. Well, I will attempt to plug my class now then. So I'm going to be doing. I'm actually doing 2 days on. We're calling it accelerated TDD. So it's on test-driven development. But although it's a 2-day course, you can also do it as a 1-day course. And I've tried to structure it in a way that if you just do it for 1 day, you'll still get a sort of a rounded out set of subjects. You'll go away with an idea of what you need to do. You'll get some value from that. But I did feel that really needs 2 days to cover all the topics that I want to cover. So if you come along for the 2nd day, then it rounds it out even more, introduces a few extra subjects and sort of revisits and deepens some of the things that we'll have done on the 1st day. So ideally come for the 2 days, but if you can't quite manage that, you can come for the 1 days.
And to clarify, it is specifically the 1st day. There's no option to take only the 2nd day.
That is correct. If someone comes to me and says that they can only do the 2nd day, they really want to do the 2nd day, I suppose at the end of the day, that will probably be down to John as well. But I don't see why not. I just wouldn't recommend it because I haven't structured the material in a way that would make as much sense.
Yeah, that seems like it would be very difficult to do. And even structuring it so that only 1 day makes sense could be pretty difficult, I feel like.
It was a bit tricky. In fact, there is a bit of a story there as well. I originally proposed it as a 1-day course. I thought most people would only really want to go for 1 day for TDD. But I was thinking at the back of my mind, I really need 2 days to cover this. And then when John Kalb, the organizer of the CppCon, was sending out the initial schedule for the conference classes, he listed me as having a 2-day class. And I wrote back to him and said, like, sure, this is a mistake. I only submitted for a 1-day class. That was what you originally accepted. But I've been thinking, maybe I could do this 2-day class. So we got talking on Slack, and I said, ideally I'd do it either way, so we can have it for 1 day or 2 day. And he said, well, let's try and do that then. And I needed to get an updated version of my abstract for this back to him within like 2 days, because he was trying to put the schedule together. Mm-hmm. And I was just going out on a family holiday with my family. We were going to be driving for 6 hours. So I managed to get my wife to support me in this. So she did most of the driving while I sat in the passenger seat with my laptop, and just that whole time just worked on this abstract, so I could get this material that would make sense for a 1 day or a 2 day course, just thinking through all the different ways that those things could interact. It was quite intense, but we got there. So I think it's going to hang together.
I have not done that for a class proposal, but I have done that more than once for other contract work, where we needed to go on a road trip for some reason, and I needed to get work done. So I was programming while my wife drove.
Yeah, we really need self-driving cars.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I don't trust them yet.
Well, because it's guys like us who are writing the code for the self-driving cars.
Yeah. You really need to use test-driven development, of course.
Yeah, that's true. So how is it running the C++ London group while you're doing all this traveling, Phil?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the last time I was on the show, I'd either was just about to have the first meeting or had just had the first meeting of my C++ London meetup group. So the last year and a half since then, it's been running every month. And every month but one, I've hosted it. Because I'm actually organising it, I can actually fit it around my own travel schedule. So it's one of the advantages or abuses, depending on which way you look at it, that I have. That one time there was just a last minute travel that I had to do. So I have a sort of a co-host now, Tom Brezza, who often helps out. He stepped in at the last minute to host that one, so I'm grateful for that. Tom actually has gone on to start his own meetup running in parallel, sort of like a sister meetup for C++ London called C++ London Uni, which is running weekly, and it's dedicated to people who are learning C++. So it's much more accessible material, and they're sort of structuring it more like a course, although it's obviously not a true university, but it's free. Meeting weekly. They've been meeting for about 6 months now, and just finished their first cycle of their course. They're just starting a new one.
Wow!
And that's been going really well. I'm really impressed with how he's managed to get that off the ground. So there's now 2 C++ London meetups running.
Yeah, so we actually just reached out to Tom, so we're going to have him on the show sometime soon, and we'll dig more into what he's doing with C++ London Uni.
I'm curious what kind of turnout you see. Sorry.
Yeah, so I've been to a few of them. I actually spoke there a couple of weeks ago, and they typically have between 10 to 20 people coming regularly. But then when they started the new cycle last week, they had, I think, 300 people registered.
Oh, wow.
Now, only because of the space they had at the time, only 50 people were able to get in person. And then they had they're now doing a live stream as well, as of recently. They had a number of people tune into that. I don't know how many people are going to be regularly turning up going forwards, because they seem to have really tapped into something now. So they're desperately looking for a bigger venue. Hopefully they'll get that sorted.
Well, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And how about the main C++ London meetup?
So that typically has between 60 to 100 people.
Wow.
Coming. So that's been doing really well. I think all the advertising on here and on Slack and other places has really helped. And the fact that obviously London is quite a good community for programmers to start with. So it's sort of on the doorstep, really. I didn't have to do a lot of work for it.
Have you started going to your meetup, Rob?
No, I still need to go to mine. I've just been to the opening meeting for it. I need to get back into that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is significantly higher numbers than we managed to get here in Denver. This week, it looks like we'll have one of our highest turnouts, which will be in the low 20s, because we have a famous international speaker coming to join us, as far as seems to have drawn a little bit more attention.
And I'll be there too.
Yes.
So speaking of all of these conferences and meetups, you're actually working on a new conference for the UK for next year, right, Phil?
I am, yes, and I haven't really announced it very broadly yet, so this will be the first time.
Are you ready to announce it now, then?
I believe I am ready to announce it now, yes. I actually finally booked the venue this week.
Okay.
I've been putting off for a long time. That was the one thing that I was waiting for before I really went too public with it. So it's going to be called C++ on the Sea. And the reason is because it is set not just by the sea, but it's actually built into the cliffs overlooking the sea, the venue. So you have a view of the sea from 3 sides.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So it's a really nice venue. It's actually a working theatre. So they have some quite big shows there on the weekends. So that the main room is definitely going to be big enough, and they have a dedicated conference suite as well. So it's a great venue that's in a town called Folkestone, which people in the UK will know. For people outside the UK, they may be more familiar with Dover, the White Cliffs of Dover. It's actually just down the road from there. It's the same cliffs, in fact. So it's overlooking the channel across to France, which means that for people living in certainly certain parts of Europe, it can actually be more accessible than say London if they're coming by train, because it's right next to the Channel Tunnel. So I think it's a great location. It's going to be a 3-track conference running over 2 days, plus 1 extra day of classes again. So it's 3 days in total. And I also have 2 keynote speakers lined up that I'm also ready to announce now. Mm-hmm. That's going to be Kate Gregory and Matt Godbolt. So I'm really excited to have them on board as well.
Yeah, those are great keynoters.
Yeah, and it's going to be next February. So not quite beach weather in the UK, which means there'll be less to distract you from the conference itself.
Now, the Dover to Calais is the closest point across the channel, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Can you actually, from that area, can you actually see France on a clear day?
You can, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I used to live just a few miles down the road from there. And from the house I lived in, as you say, on a clear day, you could see across to France. And the bit of France specifically that you could see across to was approximately where my dad lives now. So I actually look out my window, look across the sea to... Oh, obviously I couldn't see his house, but it was a nice thought.
That's interesting. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, as well as the Channel Tunnel, there are regular ferry crossings as well. So it's quite a busy port area.
Yeah, I've never taken the Channel. I have taken ferries, I think 3 times, both ways.
Right. Yeah, on the train, you can, as well as being a foot passenger, you can take cars on as well. So it's very accessible.
Right. Only problem is driving the left-hand side drive on the wrong side of the road when you get there, I guess.
I think that largely depends on whether you're West Const or East Const.
Okay, so you've got 3 tracks, you said, over 2 days.
That's right.
And you're aiming for how many talks per day?
Or
are you aiming for 90-minute sessions or 60-minute sessions?
Going to have a mix. I don't have my sort of template schedule in front of me right now, but I think I'm planning around 10, 12 talks a day. Okay. That sounds about right. Yeah, so mostly 60-minute and a few 90-minute talks.
That's a fairly good number of talks then for your first conference out.
Yes, yeah. I'm relying on the fact that having gone to so many conferences and knowing so many people in the community that I'll be able to get enough people to come along.
So do you have your call for talk submissions open yet, or when do you plan to open that?
not quite open yet. Hoping to shortly after I get back from C++ now. Just need to do a bit more to finish the website first, particularly making sure that I'm going to be compliant with the new GDPR regulations that come into force towards the end of this month.
What is that?
What is that?
So, if you haven't heard of this, you should probably look into it, because anyone that collects information, personal information, or on anyone else that might live in Europe comes under this. It's sort of related to what we call the cookie law.
Okay.
Which is mostly annoying, but this is actually much more far-reaching. I'm not an expert. I can't really give you the expert rundown now, but it's mostly about making sure that you always have consent for everything that you collect information on. So if you have someone who signs up for one thing on a website, and then you send information about something else that's unrelated, then you're in violation of it, for example. And even what they call bundling. So if you have those checkboxes at the bottom that say that you have to tick this box to receive these updates in order to join something else which doesn't have an obvious relation, then you're not allowed to do that anymore. So it always has to be explicitly opt-in, has to be very clear what you're opting in for, and it can't be bundled with something else.
Wow.
And you also have to make it clear what information you're storing and make it accessible to be able to at least delete that information and find out what information they're holding. So it all makes sense, and it's going to be really good for consumers, but it's for people that collect information, it's a really chaotic time right now.
Right.
Well, and some of these companies, their entire business model is, getting you to accidentally download McAfee when you're trying to install something else. Like, it seems like this would greatly affect them.
But I think those are the sort of places that the main target for this.
Right.
Where we want to, say Europe wants to clamp down on. And although this is a European regulation, technically it will apply to companies anywhere in the world that are collecting information if that information is about a European resident.
Right.
Which currently still includes the UK.
Maybe it won't apply to you, and I don't know.
Apparently it will, even after Brexit.
Right.
Is there anything else we want to talk about?
You have anything else, Phil?
I think we've actually covered most of the things I was going to talk about now, yeah.
Okay. So regarding the conference, it's still a ways out, but this is a brand new conference. You said February. Do you know approximately when you expect to have the tickets for sale and that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, I imagine around the same sort of time, or shortly after I get the call for papers out, I'll announce early bird pricing. Okay. There's a website already there, and it does have a link that you can go to register your personal information, where you can then be notified of announcements as they become available. So that's CppOnSea.uk.
And that's SEA.uk.
Yeah, CppOnSea.uk.
Could be a bit confusing.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's been great having you on the show today again, Phil. Obviously, you're a very busy man. Where can people go to find out everything you're doing online?
There's no one place, really. You can catch me on Twitter, Phil_Nash. I'm on the CPP Lang Slack quite a lot, as Phil Squared. Phil Squared on GitHub as well. I'll have my website, levelofinteraction.com. Now, I know I've said this a couple of times now because I've been on the show before, that you can also get to it from extralevelofinteraction.com.
Right.
So just to up my game a bit, I've also now got another levelofinteraction.com and also too many levels of indirection.com.
Okay, so does too many levels of indirection redirect to another level, which redirects to an extra, which redirects...
It does, yes.
Okay.
That's great.
I figured that would be the only way you would actually set that up.
Okay, well, it's been great having you. It's been great having you on the show again today, Phil.
That's been great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com. Website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.